But back to JC, JC was wonderful about sharing not only personalities, people that he knew, he would introduce us to, and he gave us a whole list of people that we should share seed with. And that's one of the reasons Peckerwood has such a vast collection of plants, is because we shared seed with the University of California at Berkeley, North Carolina State, an arboretum out of Seoul, Korea, Ferris Miller, and we shared seed with Mr. Funk, with an arboretum in Meriwether Arboretum in Australia.
Wow!
And these people were putting on expeditions into China at the time, and they in return sent us cuttings or seedlings from all of their collections that came in from the Orient, and it was a wonderful way of building up a wonderful collection of plants.
Which is why you were able to sort of show Asian plants alongside their North American or Mexican counterparts.
Right, we always call them the counterparts, and the whole goal was, even when I first started, it was about collecting, say, a maple that would grow in Texas, or the several maples that do grow in Texas, collecting them and growing them, and then collecting all the maples from everywhere else that we could find that would grow. That would grow
well in your climate.
Right. And at that point, it was very difficult to find plants. I mean, in Houston, you could find maybe 12 plants. In San Antonio, you could find maybe 15. Austin, you could find maybe 20 that you didn't have.
But the selection was just not
Yeah,
there.
And the mail order people were not, that was before most of the mail order went into.
Before the Herons Woods and Forest Farms got going. Are there plants that you think of that you've introduced numerous plants to cultivation through Yucca and Peckerwood through all your travels. Are there certain plants that stick out to you that you're sort of the most proud to have shared and gotten out there?
Well, some of the zephyranthes, and of course some of the palms. Some of the palms had been collected prior to that, but they had not been introduced to the public. One is Brahea morii, which is a low-growing Brahea, and the most beautiful silver leaves you've ever seen.
They're incredible.
And silver is a wonderful addition for us because of the heat. It's psychologically very cooling. Any plant that moves in the breeze or that's blue, has a blue tint, we covet because of that cooling psychological effect that it gives.
One of the plants you introduced me to in the wild, I was jumping up and down when you offered to take me to Mexico years ago when I was working with you, was I think on our first day, we drove up this sort of a new mountainside sort of super highway, and it cut through this area that had a big stand of the trunked yucca, those beautiful
yucca rostrata.
Yucca rostratas, the beaked yucca with the wonderful silver quivering leaves.
And these have proven cold hardy at Chanticleer.
And for over 10 years now, we've had them in the garden in Pennsylvania, and they've been amazing.
Right, and until we started sharing seed, and I think JC distributed 9,000 plants in 1 year that he grew from our seed collections. That's an amazing number of plants.
That's incredible, and they've ended up all over the world.
That's when Yucca rostrata was sent to Virginia, and Nolina Nelson I was also sent to Virginia, and they're still there.
It's amazing. One of the things you taught me you sort of in a way taught me to look at plants a little differently, I think. And one of the things you mentioned when I thought it was just a beautiful form, this sort of elegant trunk with the silver fine foliage. And you'd mentioned how the thing you love the most is how it moves in the wind.
Yes.
And that's something that your garden really showcases beautifully. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's hot as Hades in Texas, and when we left day before yesterday, it was still 90, and it was cooling off at night. So anything that moves or anything that I said is blue is psychologically very cooling, and it's also a wonderful way of creating space in the garden. Mm-hmm. Is that?
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned another trip in Mexico, which I think might have been the trip that started sort of more of your collecting. Was you got a call from Harvard?
Yes, Harvard had put together, they had a grant from the American Cancer Society to collect taxes in Mexico. And they sent an expedition down in 1990, I believe it was. And they rented some burros, some jackasses, and went into the mountains and thought they were going to find taxes. Well, they came back with no taxes. So Mark Kane, who at that time was the editor of Fine Gardening, knew that I knew where Taxus was. And so the Arnold got in touch with me and asked would we take them on an expedition to Mexico. And so in 1991, in the summer of 91, we spent most of the summer going back and forth to Mexico, locating as many colonies of Taxus globosa as we could find. And we found 5 major colonies. And so we were able to take them immediately to these colonies. And it was a very interesting expedition. One of the young men from Harvard, we got in late one night and there was only one restaurant in Monterrey that was open. And so we went in and he didn't know what to order, so he ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. And he came out, it was a goat's head with eyes blinking and tongue hanging out. Well, he looked at it and he said, well, I don't think I can take that. So he didn't eat. But anyhow, one of the nice things about that expedition is they introduced us, they had gotten permission from the University of Nuevo Leon, and the head of the Department of Botany there said that we should take along a young botanist by the name of Eduardo Estrada, and better known to his friends as Lalo. And at that point, he was just a student. He's now a doctor, a PhD, and he's done several books. And he went on almost every expedition that we went on. And he took herbarium pressings and sometimes we would return with 150 pressings.
Wow,
and we would return with maybe 50 or 60 seed collections. And he would get these things identified. It was very helpful in identifying. And it also was a way of making what we were doing legal. Because a lot of people have said, well, you were doing something that was illegal. Well, according to that, it was not.
It had been sanctioned because he was doing botanical
They
collections.
said that it would be a waste of our time to go through a bureaucrat in Mexico City because they would pocket the money, and it would be much
and you would end up
to
with
pay this young
useless
man
paperwork.
so much a day and give him room and board. And he learned a lot, and we learned a lot.
And where is he now? You said he's a doctor?
He's head of the herbarium at the University of Nuevo Leon in the School of Forestry.
Has he been to Peckerwood to see the garden?
Yes, we got him a summer scholarship to Harvard, and we went down to Mexico and brought him back and then put him on the plane in Houston, and then picked him up when he came back after the end of the summer. So he has been to Peckerwood, yeah.
That's fantastic. In creating this garden, you've gotten visitors from all around the world, I imagine.
Gotten what?
You've gotten visitors from all over.
Yes.
Are there any visitors or groups of visitors that have stood out? Are there any fun stories?
Well, of course, Rosemary Fairey. They had escorted her around lots of gardens in Houston, and she came out and she said, well, she looked at it and she said, well, at long last, a real garden. And it was very flattering.
There probably is not a higher compliment.
I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that statement.